many other...
This is right, Arab.
Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett, and coming up we've got the latest on stories developing around the world. And we'll kick things off with the headlines. In a bid to protest against the Taliban's diktat on the burqa for women, an online campaign started with women posting photographs of themselves in traditional Afghan attire. The United Nations convenes an aid conference in Geneva today in a bid to raise more than $600 million for Afghanistan, warning of a humanitarian crisis following the Taliban's takeover. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson hopes to meet US President Joe Biden at the White House later this month in a bid to iron out frayed relations between the two nations. North Korea carries out successful tests of a new long-range cruise missile with nuclear capability, according to state media. The United States says the tests pose threats to North Korea's neighbours. Fumio Kishida, Japan's leading contender to head the ruling party and become the next prime minister, says he will aim to boost the self-defense capability of Japan in the face of growing assertiveness from neighbour China. Novak Djokovic's latest bid for tennis records is thwarted by Daniil Medvedev. The Russian world number 2 wins a maiden Grand Slam singles title at the US Open and denies Djokovic the rare calendar slam. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is expected to hold talks with US President Joe Biden this month. This according to The Times. The two leaders are expected to meet during Johnson's 4-day trip to the US for the United Nations General Assembly, which will be held in New York around September the 21st. The aim of any meeting will be to improve strained relations between Britain and the Biden administration. WION London correspondent Benji Hire joins me now to discuss this further. And Benji, assuming they do hold talks in the United States, what would we expect Joe Biden and Boris Johnson to want to discuss?
Well, Ollie, it might depend on really how long they get together. Is this going to be a formal meeting at the White House or simply a passing in the corridor of the United Nations? Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, will certainly hope it's the former. And if so, plenty to discuss, especially since the last time these two leaders actually met in person was at the G7 summit in the UK back in June. And since then, of course, we've seen the US withdrawal from Afghanistan as a decision that's been condemned by many of Boris Johnson's own MPs. They did chat on the phone after that decision, and a readout after that phone call stated that both sides will continue to have a unified, coordinated approach among allies and democratic partners going forward. That doesn't just apply to Afghanistan, that's going to apply to many issues that Boris Johnson wants to see on the agenda. For example, climate change. Let's not forget the UK is hosting that all-important UN climate change COP26 summit later this year in November. Joe Biden is expected to attend, and Boris Johnson will be wanting to try and firm up those commitments from the United States on many different matters. In addition, Northern Ireland, a really complicated aspect of Brexit negotiations, was part of the Brexit deal, trying to maintain the flow of people and goods seamlessly and peacefully between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, a complex matter that President Biden hasn't been silent on. Personally and politically, he's very invested in Northern Ireland and the future of it, and it could play a part in another subject that Boris Johnson might want to try to talk about, a potential trade deal between the US and the UK, but President Biden says that rests on the UK respecting the Good Friday Agreement that was set out about 2 decades ago now, trying to maintain peace in the region. Now, it's worth saying quickly that the UK government, or indeed Boris Johnson's personal spokesperson, has said that there are no plans that have been laid out, no particular details or finalising the plans on this trip yet. But the government will be increasingly keen to try and fix what's been seen by many as a sort of fractured relationship between the two countries and return and restore what is more commonly known as the so-called special relationship between the UK and the United States.
OK, Benji, thank you. Hundreds of Afghan women living both outside and inside Afghanistan have taken to social media to protest against the Taliban's burqa order. Afghan women have flooded social media sites with photos of them wearing colourful traditional Afghan clothing. It is very different to the black burqa the Taliban wants Afghan women to wear. Now, last week, a group of some 300 women held a pro-Taliban protest in Kabul covered from head to toe. Traditional Afghan clothing includes flowing dresses. Covering the ankles, women also wear headscarves to cover their head. Hashtags like "Do not touch my clothes" have been trending on Twitter. Since the Taliban takeover, several freedoms enjoyed previously by women have been curbed. Women will be allowed to study in universities, but their classes will be segregated from men. They've also been banned from playing most sports, including professional cricket. Taliban fighters have taken over Afghanistan's main military prison in Bagram. The facility has a history of detentions without trials and allegations of torture. Bagram military base was an important logistical point for the United States, but now it's in a state of disorder.
This is the Bagram military base. Littered and abandoned. Bloody walls, dirty mattresses, broken furniture and personal belongings tell an eerie tale of the condition of prisoners who were detained here. It is difficult to imagine that this military base was occupied until a few months ago. Now it wears a deserted look. Taliban fighters have taken over the military base. Earlier, it was under the control of American troops. The facility has been time and again compared with the infamous Guantanamo Bay. This is because of detentions without trial and allegations of torture. According to a British news broadcaster, prisoners forced their way out of the detention centre just hours after the Taliban took control of Kabul. Those who did not make it out on their own were released by the Taliban. Now they tell stories of abuse and torture by the US troops.
They put me in a room alone for a month and made the cell very cold. Now I'm mentally sick and my mind is not working well. In the 2.5 years I was held here, a lot of damage was done to my head.
American and government of Afghanistan, the last government of Afghanistan, was very destroying my country, who killed my brother, who killed my religion. And I want to make against the government of Afghanistan and America.
The US troops quietly departed from the Bagram military base in July. The move brought an effective end to the longest war in US history. This happened at a time when the Taliban were making rapid territorial gains in Afghanistan. However, nobody had predicted the takeover. This was a crucial logistical spot for the United States. Now it is in a state of shambles. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The United Nations has convened an aid conference in Geneva today to raise more than $600 million to keep Afghanistan humanitarian programs running. When the Taliban took over Kabul, the global rights body warned of a humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. UN officials say almost half of Afghans were dependent on humanitarian aid before the Taliban took control. and they say the situation is likely to worsen in the coming days due to severe drought as well as shortages of cash. And because of the collapse of the Ghani government and the subsequent halting of foreign aid worth billions of dollars, more pressure has been mounting on the United Nations to act. Earlier this week, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said the UN itself is in financial trouble to a point it may not be able to pay some salaries of employees.
In Yemen to agree on some mechanisms that would allow to inject some cash in the Afghan economy to avoid its meltdown. That, of course, doesn't mean recognition of anything, doesn't mean any particular choice. It means finding ways, and my appeal has been to find ways to have sufficient injection of cash to allow to avoid a meltdown. And for instance, the UN at the present moment is not even able to pay its salaries to its own work.
The conference in Geneva is being attended by top UN officials, including Guterres, the head of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Peter Maurer, as well as dozens of government representatives, including German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas. Speaking of Germany, the country goes to the polls in 2 weeks and voters have seen a heated pre-election debate. Olaf Scholz, Germany's finance minister and the front-runner to replace Angela Merkel, faced tough questions over money laundering probes.
Germany will go to polls in 2 weeks. Angela Merkel will be stepping down as German Chancellor after nearly 16 years. Two main candidates for the top post engaged in a ferocious television debate. Candidate from Angela Merkel's party CDU, Armin Laschet, sparred with SPD centre-left frontrunner Olaf Scholz, who is also the current finance minister. Conservative candidate lashed out at Social Democrat, pressing him on his record on tackling money laundering. He in turn gave a strong rebuttal. Scholz denied that his office was being directly investigated by prosecutors.
It's a miracle how even in this case, when a prosecutor's office comes to your ministry and investigates, you can display such whitewashing. So I'll tell you, if my finance minister were to work the way you do, we would have a serious problem.
You see how things are being misrepresented a bit, also by being deliberately twisted. Mr. Laschet, you have to take the blame for that very clearly. There was no investigation at the Federal Ministry of Finance. It is not the case that the Public Prosecutor's Office from Osnabrück has any questions in an investigation against this ministry or against the Ministry of Justice. You created this false impression on purpose.
The heated debate was followed by a discussion on the future course of action, which also included what alliances and coalitions will be formed.
We will under no circumstance form a coalition with the left party. We will under no circumstance form a coalition with the AFD. We will not even talk to them. We will not cooperate. But Democrats have to talk to each other after an election, and we are fighting for number one.
Most experts think a three-way coalition is the most likely outcome of the election. This scenario could take several months to negotiate, during which Merkel will remain Chancellor. A snap poll suggested that hardball tactics by Conservatives had failed. 41% of respondents judged Scholz the winner. 27% favoured Laschet. The results of the snap poll further boosts SPD's candidate Scholz's chances of replacing Merkel in 2 weeks' time. Armin Laschet faces multiple challenges. He is witnessing a nosedive in ratings as the Conservatives are missing the pulling power of Merkel. Remember, she will not be running again after 4 election victories and 16 years leading Europe's biggest economy. The leader of Germany's most populous state, North Rhine-Westphalia, she was caught on camera laughing during a visit to a town hit by lethal floods in July. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
A memorial celebrating the bravery of 19th century Sikh soldiers has been officially unveiled in Wolverhampton. The Saragari Monument is the first statue in the country to specifically honour the fallen soldiers in the battle.
It was a cause for celebration and for ceremony. Hundreds of people gathered in England for the unveiling of a new statue commemorating a battle that took place 124 years ago, the Battle of the Sarangari. It was the idea of Councillor Bhupinder Gakal.
Today, we are going to make history. The village of Wensfield is going to show the whole world what you can achieve when communities come together.
It was perhaps one of the most famous last stands. 21 Sikh soldiers of the British Indian Army fought to the death against 10,000 Afghan tribesmen on a remote outpost. The bronze statue cost more than £100,000 and took over 18 months to create. It was hand-carved from clay by sculptor Luke Perry. He hopes that many connect with his art.
I hope that when people see this, firstly, that if they're people from the Sikh community and maybe little children from the Sikh community, they feel really proud and they feel more that this is their home. That, you know, that this is a massively important part of their community and they are so important to the community that there's a monument about their culture. And if you're not from the Sikh background, that you look at it and you think, that's really interesting, I'm going to learn more about that, it must be important, because it is.
The 10-foot statue stands on a 6-foot plank, and it will certainly be a landmark for this community commemorating the battle, and the hope it will be a wider beacon of remembrance for the rest of the British public. Mandy Clark, World is One, Wolverhampton.
From our studios live in New York City, I'm Susan Tehrani.
People from many different countries, some who have been in America for generations, others who are more newly arrived.
So what Joe Biden has tried to do is definitely try to frame the election as a referendum.
The US president even called President Erdogan an autocrat.
Hello, I'm Jodie Cohen, broadcasting from Jerusalem.
Israel might be on the verge of getting a new government.
Climate change will, for the first time, be an issue of important discussion.
Child labour increases for the first time in 2 decades, according to the UN.
To strengthen the alliance, boosting its defence capabilities and focus.
Visitors from all over the world come to fish in Kenya's highland rivers and alpine lakes. Kenya has an old and tiny fly fishing tradition, but enthusiasts have plans to expand.
John Guy Moses learned fly fishing from an uncle as a young man in the rivers of Mathioya in central Kenya. Since then, he's been hooked.
I like fishing. Fishing is the best game I have in life. Fishing is the only thing that makes me happy. And even if things go bad on the side of fishing, me, I am ever happy with fishing. So there is nobody who can stop me fishing.
Today, John is a guide for visitors who come from all over the world to fish in Kenya's highlands. Britain introduced trout here in the early 1900s, in the days of colonialism. The Kenya Fly Fishers Club, one of the oldest in Africa, was started 102 years ago. Fish don't draw the same crowds of tourists as the Big Five on Kenya's savannas. But the region offers remarkable experiences, says Zach Gishane, who owns a fishing lodge.
Imagine spending the morning from dusk to afternoon fishing, and the afternoon out taking pictures of the wild animals. Where else can you have this? And you have the opportunity to fish inside and outside the park among the elephants, and you are fishing for trout. This is the only place.
There's even a thriving local fly tying industry which supplies customers from Norway to New Zealand. These artificial tiny baits are designed to imitate the insects fish eat. Some estimates suggest a third of the flies used in Europe come from Kenya. John Nyapola custom designs fishing flies for export around the world.
Most of the customers outside, they prefer working in Kenya with the Kenyans. So they give us big orders. By having big orders, you'll have to employ more people.
Enthusiasts think promoting the sport can create jobs and help protect the rivers. At one point, 2,000 kilometers of trout fishing rivers crisscrossed Kenya. Today, it is much less. Veteran fisherman Musa Ibrahim explains.
Pressure for land is making water obstruction more prevalent in most of the good trouting sports that we had in this country. And conservation, if we don't conserve what's left now, in the next generation, in the next 30 years, we will not have any good trout rivers left in this country.
But John and Musa are perhaps unique. Many people who live in Mathioya Valley see fly fishing as a vestige of the colonial era. Here, they fish to eat rather than for fun.
And finally, it is certainly a hot concert venue. In Russia, a musical concert held not inside a theatre, but in a volcano lava pit. I'll leave you with those pictures. I'm Ollie Barrett. Thanks very much indeed for watching. Do join us again, same time tomorrow for more news and updates. Stay tuned to WION World is One.
We wanted to see how it will sound here, in the valley of the volcanoes, near volcano Gorli, which is behind my back, in the cone of a crater that erupted maybe 1,000 years ago. That's the experiment we will be conducting right now.
As classical academic musicians, we've been all around the world. But playing here, just like that, it's just pure happiness. It's like a dream.
This is right, Arab.